I was broke. I was depressed. I was stuck. But nothing could have prepared me for the secret affair that turned my life upside down and the betrayal that almost destroyed me. Chinedu stared at the pile of unpaid bills scattered across his small wooden table. His hands shook as he held the last eviction notice. His tailoring shop had collapsed, and his savings were gone. He had never felt so small, so powerless. At night, Chinedu lay awake on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The sound of distant Lagos traffic filled the silence of his room. He thought about his dreams, how far they had slipped away. Tears rolled silently into his pillow. Amaka entered his life on one of his darkest days. She was warm, kind, and full of encouragement. She told him he was worth more than his failures. Her smile became the light that guided him forward. They spent long evenings walking by the lagoon. Amaka's laughter filled the air, soft and genuine. Chinedu felt alive again, his depression easing. He whispered, "One day, I'll build us a future." But Amaka was hiding something. She always avoided questions about where she lived. She never introduced him to her family. Her phone calls at night made Chinedu uneasy. Despite his doubts, Chinedu slowly rebuilt his tailoring work. He started sewing from his small room. Amaka encouraged him, cheering at his first client. For the first time in years, he felt hope. One afternoon, Chinedu visited Amaka unexpectedly. At her doorstep, he overheard laughter inside. Another man's voice echoed with hers. Chinedu froze, his chest tightening. Chinedu pushed the door open. Amaka jumped in shock, her eyes wide. The other man calmly stood, adjusting his suit. "Meet my fiancé," Amaka whispered, her voice breaking. Chinedu's lips trembled as he struggled to form words. His knees felt weak, as though the floor had dropped beneath him. Amaka reached for him, her fingers shaking, but he stepped back quickly. You were engaged?" His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. Amaka's eyes filled with tears, her hands clasped together in desperation. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered, her body trembling. The man beside her, Emmanuel, stood tall, his broad chest rising and falling calmly. He placed a protective arm around Amaka's shoulders, his eyes cold and challenging. "You should leave," Emmanuel said, his voice steady, dismissive, like he was swatting away a child. But Chinedu's heart was already breaking into 1,000 pieces, shards of trust piercing deeper than any words could. He turned on his heel, storming out of the apartment, the sound of the door slamming behind him echoing in his chest like a gunshot. Chinedu stumbled back into his one-room apartment, collapsing onto the floor. His breath came in ragged gasps as he clutched his chest, the betrayal eating into his soul. He replayed every laugh, every promise, every whispered, "I love you," in Amaka's voice. And each memory now twisted into a blade. He slammed his fist against the wall, his knuckles splitting, blood smearing the peeling paint. The world spun, and he buried his face in his hands, his sobs loud, raw, and unrestrained. The silence after the tears felt even heavier than before, as if life itself had abandoned him. For weeks, Chinedu barely left his room. His sewing machine sat untouched in the corner, gathering dust. The little savings he had vanished, spent on cheap bottles of gin that dulled his pain. Neighbors knocked, offering food, but he refused to open the door. He sank deeper into the darkness, questioning whether life was even worth living. Every night, he replayed the scene in Amaka's apartment, tormenting himself with what-ifs. His dreams, his love, his hope, all gone in one revelation. One evening, just as Chinedu was drifting into a drunken haze, someone banged on his door. He groaned, dragging himself across the room to open it. To his shock, it wasn't Amaka, it was Ngozi, his childhood friend. She looked him over with sharp, disappointed eyes, her hands on her waist. "Chinedu, look at you," she snapped, her voice carrying both anger and concern. "You've turned yourself into a ghost." Her words cut through his fog, and for the first time in weeks, shame burned his chest. He dropped his eyes, unable to meet her gaze. Ngozi didn't give him a chance to argue. She pushed past him, entering the room, her eyes scanning the mess. Empty bottles, crumpled clothes, unpaid bills. It all told a story of a man undone. She turned to him, her voice breaking slightly. "You think drinking yourself to death will fix it?" Chinedu clenched his fists, his shame turning to anger. "You don't know what it feels like to be betrayed like that," he shouted. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew she was right. After hours of arguing, Ngozi's words struck a nerve. She reminded Chinedu of his talent, his dreams, and the future he once wanted. She reminded him that Amaka's betrayal didn't erase his worth. That night, long after she left, Chinedu sat by his sewing machine again. He touched the fabric, his fingers trembling, as if greeting an old friend. For the first time since the heartbreak, a spark of determination returned to his eyes. The next morning, Chinedu cleaned his room thoroughly, throwing away bottles and trash. He washed his face, shaved, and stared into the mirror for a long time. The man looking back at him was bruised, but not broken. He decided he would rebuild, not for Amaka, not for revenge, but for himself. Every day, he stitched clothes, even when there were no customers. Slowly, word spread again in the neighborhood that Chinedu was back to work.